I believe that God has an amazing way of playing tricks on us. The ones we wait for, right? And so when I was reading this, one of my buddies who you guys get a chance to meet today, his name is Michael Ivanov, best-selling author, one of the best speakers, motivational speakers in the world. If your company hasn't had him, you're missing out. But as I was looking at this book that he had done, The Ones We Wait For, it was interesting because we were having so many technical difficulties this morning that phrase kept coming to me over and over again. The ones we wait for. Well, this morning we were waiting for each other. We were waiting for each other because the technology, we had it planned. We had everything set. And then one little thing didn't work out. And isn't that exactly the way that life works all the time, where we have this plan and then we have actually what happens? And I think one of the best ways to be able to express this is to be able to sit down with the author of the one who created The Ones We Wait For. And not only this book, but 5 others. His goal is to be able to write a book a year. For me, I can't wait for them. I was introduced because of my friend David Jansen, one of my best friends in the world, had read one of his books, and he was like, man, this guy is absolutely phenomenal. I found him on social media. I reached out, and I was so excited that he actually responded. And because of that, we have formed a friendship. And since then, he's had a little daughter, 7 months old, and his career is absolutely flourishing. It's amazing for me because not only is he one of the best authors that I've read, not only one of the best speakers that I've seen, but an even more incredible human being. And you guys are going to experience that today. So why don't we not wait anymore? But let's get this party started.
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never know, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
Michael, you were the one that I was waiting for this morning, man. Hey, did you see your cameo in the video for the Vibe Room right there? Did you see?
I did.
You and Kinsey were in there.
That is an awesome intro video right there.
Welcome to the show, man. A book a year, man. Tell me how that feels. And also, is there any pressure to that once you said that statement?
No pressure to it. It actually keeps kind of keeps a fire under my butt. I tend to. I'm a bit of a procrastinator, a bit of a slacker, and so for me, it's always a reminder to kind of keep the wheel going, and it allows me to think. I think it's one of the best. Everyone talks about meditation. Everyone talks about all these things to kind of keep them in the flow, to keep them going. For me, it's writing. When I sit down to write, that's what gets me started to think about life. Hey, what do I actually believe? And a lot of times I think I know what I believe until it comes out into words, and I'm like, okay, that's not what I actually think about this topic, and it really forces me to chew on things. And so I love it. It's something that keeps me going, keeps me alive, keeps me focused on the end goal and on the dream. And there's a lot of purpose to that.
Well, you're living the dream, man. And what I love about your writing style is the parable sense. And when I first came in contact with it, the Mount of Olives is the one that my friend Dave reached out to me and was like, "Oh, you have to read this book." And then as I sat down with The Ones We Wait For, it hit me hard because you think about these things as a kid. Like I remember thinking of it because someone tells you about heaven or whatever it is, and generally it's somebody is trying to comfort you in a time of tragedy, right? Oh, about heaven or whatever it is. And then when you experience it, it's a little bit different. And so for you, was this based off of things that you had experienced, or are you able to are you just that great of a storyteller where you could just snatch something out the air, man?
This is not. I'm fortunate enough to not have lost anyone close to me yet. I'm one of 13 kids, a big family, and I understand life. I know that it's only a matter of time, like we don't live forever. But I've had, several close friends that we've lost over the last year and a half. And it was more of what sparked the book, this whole idea, talking about heaven, talking about, thinking about the afterlife, thinking about, what's next, is people were, I was getting a lot of, I have a newsletter that I send out with people who read my books, and I'll get responses, and they're like, hey, this book inspired me. This book, made me realize I'm not doing enough with my life, or this book made me realize that there's a lot of opportunities that I missed out on. And there's a sense of regret that I feel like, especially from the older audience, people who are, 60s, 70s, which surprised me because I thought I was writing to a different audience. But I'll get a lot of people who read my other books, and they're inspired, and they're like, I feel like God can still do something with my life. I just don't know what it is yet. I'm 65 years old, I'm close to retirement, or I am retired, and I don't know what that next thing is. And so there was a sense of that I kept getting of regret, a sense of I didn't do enough with my life. And I was like, you know what? I want to write a book that that reminds people that yes, there's a purpose to this life, and if you're not dead, you're not done. But at the same time, there's something so much bigger that we're waiting for. There is something so much more that the best is yet to come. And so I specifically for that audience, I wanted to remind people that there's a purpose to your life now, but there's something so much bigger in store for us, for those who believe it. And that was the whole idea for the book.
Well, I think it's genius too, because, as I read through your books, I can actually see myself in the book. Your audience sees themselves in the book, as opposed to, I've never read something of yours and then felt like, oh, he's talking at me. It was almost like, you could see, how do you craft and write that way where everybody, and I can imagine your audience is from a lot of different background, diverse background, but we all feel as if we're either the guide in the ones we wait for, or the one showing up. Hopefully we get to show up in heaven. Some of us are like, well, I'm trying to work it out. But how do you craft it that way? And why was that the type of style that you chose to write in the first place?
It allows me to have a conversation with myself, I'd say. So if you notice, most of my books, I think actually all the fiction stories, most of them there's, it's a dialogue between the kind of the leader, or the wise man, and then the person that's dealing with this thing. And so it allows me to have a conversation with myself. So, in the character that is going through something, I get to express my own frustrations, my own fears, my own self-doubts. And then in the wise person, the leader in the story, or the person that they're learning from, the sensei, whatever you want to call them, that's what I think the answer is, or what I know the answer is, but don't want to admit it yet. And so it's like I get to express my own fears and self-doubts into the story. I get to pour out, but also answer those simultaneously. And so through that dialogue, through those questions, I get to kind of test my own beliefs and theories out, and fears, and put them out there, but also find the answers to, hopefully. And so with this book, it was especially with this book, it was really fun because, we all have, even, for those of us who've been believers all of our lives, like, you still have doubts. It's like you mentioned, at the beginning, where it's like, it's something that we comfort ourselves with, but then when it happens, it's just like, do I really believe this, what I've been telling myself all my life, or what people have been telling me? And so it forced me to be able to ask the question, get an answer, ask the question, do some research on it, biblical research. I've read books about people with near-death experiences, and what they saw, and kind of just a combination of all those things to be able to answer the questions that I have about life after death. And so it was really fun to do that.
Has Kenzie ever read one of your books and then been like, she found out that you were struggling with that thing, or she called you to the table?
Oh yeah.
That, what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the most was with the cabin at the end of the train, that to book. That was my fourth book. Cause that one was more of, I had no idea where that book was going to go. It's ended up being currently my bestseller, but that was a book that it was probably more of myself than any of my other books, where it was just like an unload of my own fears and self doubts and frustrations, and you know the struggle to achieve your dreams. You know, the bigger the goal, the bigger the dream, or I'm sorry, the bigger the dream, the more obstacles you're going to face along the way. You know,
Yeah.
the more setbacks you're going to have. And so that with that book, I specifically, um, I put a lot of my own of myself in there. And so when she's reading that, she's like, "This makes a lot of sense." And and what about this? And yeah, so it was really cool.
What sparked you to want to write in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I always jump to a couple of different themes, but the overall theme was that I always wanted to. I always felt like I wanted to do something bigger with my life. You know, I was working in a IT department of a small printing company, sitting in a cubicle, that kind of a thing. Going, just a Monday through Friday. Sunday comes around, I start to feel the Sunday night blues. I'm a little bit depressed, and so. Uh, I kind of went on this personal development journey, and I started to read anything I can get my hands on, just studying people that were living successful lives, impactful lives, not just financially successful, but people who were doing something bigger with their life. And I stumbled upon an author by the name of Augmendino. I think I've shared that with you before. Yeah, and Augmendino, his style was a style that I'm trying to imitate, where it's like parable form, it's story form, but it's life principles in there. And I was like, when I was starting out, I'm like, I don't know what it is that I have to, who's going to listen to me, who's going to bring me in to speak, because I was already kind of getting some of those ideas, and I wanted to do that, wanting to do something bigger. But I was like, but if I can put a story together, and if the story is compelling, the story is interesting, the story keeps, then it doesn't matter who Michael Ivanov is. If it's a good product, it's a good product. And so that was kind of my way to sneak in and start talking about success principles and things like that without having a platform yet at the time.
So did your speaking career start before your writing did, or was it simultaneously, or
Uh,
did you say, hey, I want to create this speaking platform, so therefore I'm going to write a book?
So almost simultaneously. So I wanted to write a book because I knew that was going to be able to give me a platform. But ultimately, yes, I wanted to start speaking. I loved guys like Jim Rohn. Mendino was a motivational speaker as well, the author that I mentioned. And so the writing was what I figured was going to be able to give me a platform. Because with speaking, it's like you have to have some sort of a foundation to stand on. Hey, what are you an expert in, or what is your like what is your competitive advantage, what is your thing, like why should we hire you? And so for me, I was like, if I can write books and I can make them successful, and I can push them, and I can get them out to a lot of people, that kind of gives me a platform to stand on to then come and speak to your audience. And so I was trying to push it simultaneously, but the books came first, and that was by plan.
So when you sit down to write a book, say when you sat down to write the ones we wait for,
Mhm.
is there a structure that you start in, and is there like almost a syntax that you run down, or do you just start dumping ideas and then condense them, or what is Michael's process?
Yeah, it's a I get asked that a lot. I've only written one nonfiction book, and with that one, I structured it completely. So the whole book I had chapter by chapter laid out. Like in this chapter, I want to talk about this, and ultimately it's going to lead to the main idea. With all of my fiction books, 5 of them, including the ones we wait for, um, it was I usually get one spark of an idea. Like I'll get like for the cabin at the end of the train, it was like it'd be really a cool story, would be just a cozy setting, would be riding in the back of a train through snowy mountains, and it's a setting where you can't leave even if you want to. You're kind of trapped, whether it's because of the journey or because the train got derailed or whatever it is, and you're kind of stuck in this moment where you have to ponder life. And so I usually get the inspiration for the books in that way, where it's a one setting, one scene, and then I'm like, okay, how do I put that into a story? So with the ones we wait for, I actually had a couple of dreams, which was the first time I've ever incorporated something, dreams into a book. But I had several dreams about passing away, and about for the first things I saw there. And I think the dream that I'm talking about specifically was like 5 years ago. I never planned on putting it into a book, but when I started getting those emails from these people talking about I still don't know what my purpose is. I'm 70 years old. I still feel like God can do something with my life. I know He's not done with me yet. Then all of a sudden I remembered that dream, and I remember there's so much more to hope for that we have than just this life. So one, don't worry about this life. Like your life has had an impact on people. So let me remind you of that. But there's something so much more to hope for afterwards. And if you can find a way to use your gifts and talents now, there's still, we have even something better yet to come. And so that's where I got the idea. So for me, it was like, okay, how do I put that into a story? Because no eye has seen, no ear has heard, what God has planned for those who love Him. We know that. So we can't, it's impossible for us to imagine what heaven is. But I was like, if I can start, incorporate that dream and just give, because for me, it gave me so much hope. It gave me something. I was like, man, what we're looking forward to, it's not the end of something. It's only the beginning of something so much greater. And so I was like, if I could put that into a story somehow, that would be, that would give people, I feel like people would be better people if they knew that just on the other side, the minute we take our last breath here, we step into eternity, that there's something so much more in store. If I can get people to think about that and imagine that even for a little bit, how much better would that make us as people now? And so now it's like, I got the idea. How do I create a story out of it? And so I just usually start jotting down, it'd be cool. It'd be cool if the character faced their demons, they would, because I always picture like this, when I pass away, I feel like I'm going to be asking a whole lot of questions, like, why was this like this? Why did I struggle with this? Why, how come I didn't get an answer here when I really needed it? How come, God wasn't there for me like I think He should have been, that kind of a thing. And so all the questions that I have now, I can start answering it through this story. And now it's just a matter of, I have the kind of the meat of the bones of the book. Now it's a matter of, okay, where's point A, where's point B, like, where are they starting? Where are they going? What do they experience along the way, that I can still answer these questions and move the story along. So hope that gives you some.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's incredible, man. And such a cool concept, Do you see a movie happening from that one?
I think that'd be incredible. I've had several times people reach out, um, uh, wanting to introduce me to a producer, that kind of a thing. We're still in contact with one lady in particular, uh, for, I believe it's for the Mount of Olives. She's like, I have a friend. I've read your book. I have a friend who's a producer. I want to introduce you to him. So I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Do you think that it would be a feature? Would you want it to be a feature film? Do you want it to be a smaller series, like a limited series? Would you want it? Do you think that you could deliver the message in a short, 5-10 minutes at a film festival?
I think I could. Yeah, I guess it would depend on the book, but yeah, I think I could. I think it'd be I think it could be something that um, that we could put together. That, yeah, in my imagination, yeah, I think we could.
How has perspective changed for you? You just had something happen 7 months ago that life changed. It brings less sleep, and brings more love than you could ever imagine. You can't even. You really can't quantify this event, even if people try and tell you it.
Yeah.
What perspective shifts have you had since the 7 months ago?
It's incredible. So that's my little girl, Anina, is her name. So my mom's name is Anna. My wife's Mackenzie's name, or her grandmother's name, was Anna as well, but she's Italian. So in Italian, Anina is the name for Anna. And so we're like, you know what? That's my mom's name. That's your grandma's name. And so we went with that. Um, people have always told me, having a kid is going to change your life. Having a kid is going to change your life. And I was like, yeah, like we talked about before we started recording, is, I have a lot of nieces and nephews. I'm like, I know what it's like to have a kid around. You have so much love for them, but I didn't know, and it's so incredible. It's like my whole perspective shifted on my goals and my dreams, because the goals and the dreams are there, but now it's not for my ego that I'm trying to achieve them. It's not to make something of myself. Now it's like, I want to show my little girl what's possible, and I want her to not just to hear me say, hey, you can do anything that you want to, but look, dad did it. And so there's nothing to be afraid of. And so now my whole perspective has changed on why I do what I do, and what I'm trying to accomplish.
You're probably one of the most humble people that I've ever met. I mean, and the best dressed. Like when you came to the Vibe Room, dude, everyone felt bad about themselves because here he comes in an 18-piece suit, dressed to the nines. You provided books for the whole entire audience, which was absolutely amazing. I'm looking forward to one of the Vibe Rooms where I actually get to interview you live, which I think would be a lot of fun to be able to
I
do.
love that.
Um, where's the humility come from, man?
I'd have to say probably my parents. Yeah, I'm probably not as humble as you are making me out to be, Kelly. I'll just be 100% honest with you. But my family's I was born in the Soviet Union. We moved here when I was 2 years old, and so my whole life has been, we're my parents are doing well now. But when we were growing up, I mean, my dad would do this thing where he had a cell phone. He had a cell phone service. I forgot what the service was at the beginning, but it's like you get your first minute free. So my dad would call my mom on the way home from work, and he would hang up at like 58 seconds, and then he would call back again just to keep getting that free minute because you'd get charged by the minute. At that point, when we were kids, we didn't do Christmas gifts. Because my mom would put together a big meal. We'd have a big meal, but my parents couldn't afford to get us Christmas gifts. And I remember there was actually one Christmas where I think some church or some organization found out about our family, and at that point, I think we had like 8 kids. And so one Christmas morning, and we get a call from a complete stranger, and they're like, "Hey, there's some people coming. They want to bless you with some gifts. They'll be there, at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was." And so my mom's like, "Santa's coming," and for us, it was like, what the heck is, what's happening? And we got these two Jeeps pull up into our driveway, and they're full from the seats to the roof with gifts. And they found out all the ages of the kids, and they got like 4 gifts per child. And yeah, they just loaded our living room up. And so that was like one of my favorite Christmas memories, is that scene where we're in our living room and these people, complete strangers, we don't know who these people are, they came, they dumped all these gifts, and they walked out. And so, going back to your question, I think, that I always remember that. I remember who I am. I remember, where we started. I remember what it was like. And so I always see myself in that way. And, no matter what I'm doing or what we have now, the blessings that we have now, I always remember what it took from my parents, what it took, to get us here in the first place. So I think that helps a lot.
Whenever you're going through a project like the ones we wait for, when you're doing that, you're asking yourself questions, right? And then so you're being able to answer them. You're able to take your theory, and you get to be the person that's like, "Oh, well, I'm struggling with this. I got the sensei or the mentor or whatever it is." When you were done, what questions were you left with, and what did you continue to struggle with? Because I know, like, as an achiever, the way that you are, it's not that you get done with something and then you're just done.
Yeah.
Take us into the mind of Michael. What questions were you left with?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, just the first thing that comes to mind is, what is it actually going to be like? Because we can, the mind is a powerful thing. We can imagine something, and in order to put the story together, I'm seeing these places, I'm seeing this happening, this unfolding, and so I'm really there. And so, in order to describe something, you kind of have to see it first, and then put it into such a limited medium like words. Because when you're reading a book, you're looking at black, letters on a piece of paper. But as an author, my job is to take what I see in my mind, put it through this limited medium into words, and have the reader have the same experience that I had in my mind.
Yeah.
And so, so it's a lot of mental investment, and you're imagining. And so, yeah, when I was done with the book, I'm like, man, how cool would it be if it was like this? But I'm like, but what's it really going to be like? What is that first moment stepping into eternity? What is that really going to be like? Who do we see? Who's the first person that we see? Who's there waiting for me? And what's that going to be like? And so, I guess it made me really start to think, about those, first moments, and yeah, I don't know if I have a specific question in mind, but yeah, it really made me imagine it a lot more.
What does it look like for you? Like, one of my favorite
Mm.
scenes in Talladega Nights was when
Mhm.
he was like, "I like my sweet baby Jesus with wings." You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
what for in your side, what is it? I mean, what does that look like? What does the voice sound like? Right? Is it a
Mhm.
Morgan Freeman? Is it a does it have a nice accent? You got a bit of an accent. Like when I hear it, I love
Mhm.
it. And I forget about it sometimes when we haven't talked in a bit, and then I'll hear you, and I just on
Yeah.
certain words I hear it, and I'm like, man, I mean, your
Yeah.
your language is so much more expensive with the accent. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yes. It's interesting, a quick thing on that, on the accent. It's interesting because I never thought I had an accent. I've lived here the majority of my life,
uh-huh.
but recently I want my daughter to speak Russian, so I've been listening to Russian music, books, talking to her in Russian. So I feel like I'm developing more of an accent over the years because I'm now speaking and thinking in two different languages a lot more than I used to when I was younger, whereas primarily English, even though I always spoke Russian, but maybe some of that came back. But anyway, sorry to distract you from that.
No, I love that. And when you grow up in, so it was Russian in the house and English at school. Then is that
Yeah,
how it was?
yeah.
Okay.
Uh, well, even between my siblings, it started once we all picked up English. Then it was just between each other in English. We would always talk to my parents in Russian, but my dad always kind of tried to push us to keep talking in Russian, just not to lose the language. But so that's what was harder for a while. I really got my Russian got pretty bad because it was between my siblings at school, friends. It was always in English, and so I really had to put in some effort to kind of really, you know, pick up the vocabulary again and really be able to express myself because I knew Russian, but to express yourself is a whole different, a whole different thing. And so I really had to pick it back up.
Are the books translated in Russian?
No, not yet. I have some. The Man Evolves is in Hungarian, French. They're working on the Chinese one right now. And there's one more. I for some reason is slipping my mind, but I do want to get it in Russian. I told my the girl who's working on the international translations. I told her if you can give me a publisher that wants to do it in Russian, that'd be awesome.
What's the first stage like for a aspiring author? Because I'm sure that you had this happen the first time. I was just talking with a friend the other day, and I said the moment that you write a book, every person
Mm.
on the street comes up to you and is like, "I'm writing a book," and then
Yeah,
you'll ask like, "Oh, cool! Like, what is the book?" And they're like, "I haven't written anything, but I've been
yeah, yeah,
thinking about it for quite some time." What's the
yeah,
difference between like what's that first step? Because it's most of the time the start that stops us.
yeah. I think having something, having something down on a piece of paper, like writing it. A lot of times people start. Okay, I want to write a book. How did you publish it? How did you do this? Where did you find an editor? And they start to overwhelm themselves with all these things, and so like you said, it's the start that stops them. They become so overwhelmed with all this stuff that it's just like, well, I don't even know if it's that good of a book anymore or that good of an idea anymore. You start to doubt yourself right away, and it's a really overwhelming thing. So for me, I always say, if you have an idea, start writing it. Because when you've already committed to it and you've already invested some of yourself into it, you're a lot more likely to go put the effort into go and get an editor and keep pushing it and trying to find a publisher or whatever it is that next step is. But yeah, getting something down and start working on it, start writing it, and I think that's probably the best thing is don't worry about all the other stuff. Take it one step at a time, and yeah, because otherwise you're just going to overwhelm yourself.
Now, you talked about it earlier about creating a platform, right? So you created a platform with the books. That
Hmm.
led to the speaking part of it. How did you learn the business? Because that business is, and being in that also, it's a lot of times a very individual sport, right? And there's not,
Mm. Oh
there's
yeah,
a little bit more gatekeeping because a person thinks, oh,
oh yeah,
maybe I'm competing with you, whatever, which once you realize that it's not, it
yeah,
changes the game. But
absolutely.
how did you learn a completely new business? I mean, you were how old? How many years ago was this when you went into this?
Into the speaking, or I
Yeah,
guess into
speaking and writing.
yeah, 2017 is when I published my first book, was The
Okay.
Mount of Olive. So about a year, a year after that, I think, is when I got my first paid speaking engagement. So I was doing speaking, but I was doing at local events, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So officially, first paid one, making me an official
Yeah.
speaker
Yeah.
was in
Yeah.
2018.
How'd you
So
and how did you teach your, because that's learning a whole different industry coming from an IT
absolutely,
department,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where did you gain your knowledge in that? And as you were going through, what about
Mm.
your, because hits to confidence happens in that time too, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I started buying. I was buying courses. I was following other speakers. And it's tough because nowadays I feel like, well, nowadays maybe it was always like that, where it's like when you buy a course, I still feel like you don't always get all the details. It seems like that, and so I'd have to buy, like, watch podcasts, read blogs, buy a course, and I'd get bits and pieces of information that I had to start putting together to actually, like, all right, this is what it's actually going to take, because a lot of people that are selling this stuff on the courses aren't, doing it, or doing it to the degree that you want it to, and so you can't get all the information to get to you to where you want to go. And so it's just kind of putting things together, attending conferences, that kind of a thing. One of my biggest, as far as you talking about hits to confidence, well, I had a lot of self doubt into it. Like, I've mentioned it, I believe, in the last time we had this conversation, I ran out of my speech class in college. So I was like, business side of it, it's mathematical. It's like, I need to do this, but is this something I should be doing? Is this something I can be doing? Was really something I struggled with. And I attended a seminar by a public speaking seminar by that was held by Bo Eason. He used to play for the Houston Oilers. I want to say we talked about this last time, but I'm not sure. But he played for the Houston Oilers. He was a safety, played for 7 years, I think, and then he did Broadway stage performing, and then now he teaches speakers on how to use their body language, or how to use their physicality to express themselves in their story. And when I came back from that 3-day seminar, I think it was in La Jolla, California, is where it was, and that was like, I was a different person. And I remember my brother, I did a local event where I was, still trying to get into the speaking thing. So I knew I needed footage, I needed pictures of me standing in front of people, because otherwise no one's going to bring you in if they can't see that you're speaking anywhere. And so I'd hold my own events, and I'd offer people coffee and donuts to come, and I would speak, and I'd put together these little messages. And it was when I came back from that event that my brother was like, dude, you are like, this is something now you have to do. Like, your confidence, the way you carry yourself, the way you deliver your speech was like night and day between just a week ago before you went to the event. And so that was a huge thing for me. So little by little, like that, like learning the business, it was like, I'm trying to figure out the business side of it, but realizing I'm lacking in, or not realizing that I'm lacking in confidence in the first place. And so when you're doubting the fact that you can even do something, it's kind of hard to stay persistent in the business aspect of it and reach out and try to get connected with speaker agencies, that kind of a thing. So, like you're mentioning about, learning the business side of it, was just one small little bits of information here and there. But the confidence side of it, I had to build up. I was lacking in that big time.
Like when you go to a speaking engagement, what makes
Mhm.
a good audience, and what do you like? If you could just speak to the audience before you actually spoke to the audience and say, this
Mhm.
is going to draw out the best in me, what would that be?
As far as what I would ask of them, or
Yeah, because I
like,
think a lot of times, like even say, I had to check my daughter and my wife the other day. If they listen to this, they're gonna get mad at me for it. But I was talking to them the other day, right? And I was expressing something. Now, obviously, it wasn't that interesting because both of them kind of walked into the other room, got on their phones, and they were uh-huh-ing me, but they weren't listening.
yeah,
And I mean, obviously, when I look at it, I'm just like, I wasn't that interesting. If I was interesting, they would have listened.
yeah,
But
yeah.
as they sat down, they did that. I said, hey guys, I want your attention. I said it kind of assertively. And I said, I know this is not information that you want to hear right now, but it's
Mhm.
information that you need to hear. Cause we were talking about my daughter driving and things like that. And I addressed the fact that they were on the phone. I addressed the fact that they had lacked eye contact. I addressed all those things. And then I went in. Sometimes what I've found in speaking engagements is sometimes, and I always take it on myself, but sometimes the audience not being engaged can stop them from getting the best out of the speaker too.
Mm.
So it's not
Yeah.
just the speaker that has to, I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
I always take it personal though, Michael. Like for
Mhm.
me, I always take it personal, and I am always like, basically I sucked. If I didn't suck, they would have listened or they would have reacted.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but if I could have a
That,
precursor in
mhm.
my side, if a person will sit on the edge of their seat, no matter who the speaker is, you'll get a better speaker. If
Yeah.
you move your head, not
Yeah.
fast, but slow,
Mhm.
you'll get a better speaker. If you
Absolutely.
react
Okay. Yeah.
to what they're saying and engage in it, you'll get a better speaker. From your
Mm.
side, what do you see that if you could sit the audience down before you spoke to them and said, hey, guys, if you do this, you'll get the best out of
Yeah.
me, what would that be?
Yeah. You nailed most of them right there. Sitting up, like, I share a lot of stories in my talks. I have a lot of principles that I share on, and so it can get someone thinking deep. And when you're thinking deep, sometimes you kind of just you're kind of like locked in, but you're frozen. And so I try to include a lot of humor. So yeah, if I I guess if I could warn the audience, I have a dry sense of humor, so you might hear a joke when you don't expect it. I won't be smiling, but it'll come through. Maybe I can give them a couple warnings like that, because I found that audiences that, which is it's a really I'm like you, or yeah, if I didn't get the kind of reaction that I thought, I really I'm like, man, was I talking too fast? Was I trying to get through? Like, what was it that where did I screw up on that? Yeah, I also take it heavy. I think that's part of being, you know, being good at what you do. You obsess over it. Sometimes a little too much. You beat yourself up over it, but you can't be the best you can be if you don't obsess over it and you don't look back on footage and you don't, hey, how come after this speech I didn't, I had a couple of people come up and ask for books, but not everyone. Sometimes everyone jumps up and comes in, but this time for some reason, and so I really overanalyze that as well. Um, yeah, if I could warn them about my dry sense of humor, because sometimes it falls on deaf ears, and sometimes people are just on it. I don't know if they have enough coffee or whatever it is, and if they can catch that my sense of humor, my little side jokes, those little things that I'm trying to limit because sometimes they fall on deaf ears. But the more of that I include and I can really get them laughing, then you hit them with the principles, with the stories, with something deep, and they're locked in. So yeah, for me, humor, and catching on to some of my humor, I think helps the audience. Every time I can get an audience that is right there with me, I mean, we're locked in all the way, and they're cracking up on moments where I wasn't even planning on trying to be funny, but it's like you were saying, it makes you a better speaker with the audience engaged, because then it's like then you're loose, you're in your flow. There's parts of my sense of humor that are coming out where I don't even I'm not even trying to be funny, but it's just the way I react to something, or a certain thought that I have, and when the audience is engaged like that, then I'm locked in. Now I'm spending a little bit more time, giving a little bit more pauses, putting a little bit more effort into a certain story that I'm telling. Where is if I have an audience that's looking on their laptops or whatever it is, and that's one thing it's a big pet peeve of mine. If a lot of business conferences, you'll have guys and gals that you know I think they're just used to crappy speakers, and so they already have their laptop up. Like I'm coming in, like you're someone speaking, you're waiting in the back and you see laptops open and you're like, oh crap, I got to do something that is going to either ask them to put them away just for a little bit, or hit them with a story or something that really gets their attention. Because, yeah, if I see people looking down, it's like subconsciously I'm like, all right, get through, get through the story, and you kind of start pushing yourself and you're getting through as opposed to being present and being there with them. And so that's huge for me.
What about the things that you grade yourself on when you're going through that most people wouldn't think? They'll come up to you as an audience and say, "Oh my gosh, it was so amazing!" But in your head, and when you were talking about the
Mm,
obsession, and I mean,
mm,
you're one of the best at what you do, so you're constantly wanting to get better. What are
mm.
some of those things that you're looking at? Okay, well, did I hit on this? Did I hit on that? Did I hit on this? That are the most important to you personally when you come off a stage?
Uh, for me, I'm a fast talker, so for me, it's really. Um, I notice when I can actually slow myself down and retell this, whether I'm sharing a story and making a point out of it or a principle, And the more I can actually tell the story like I want to, the more impact I know that it'll have, the more it'll sink in. And so what I always beat myself up on is, hey, did I was I rushing through it? Was I just trying to get through, or did I really stay? That's like one of my biggest things that I'm working on right now is the fact that I gotta slow myself down and enjoy that moment and be present in that moment, because that's what allows me to connect with my audience. I think the audience subconsciously can feel and can tell when you're just trying to get through something, and so, but when you're right there and you're present and you're connecting, that's when people are like, he's talking to me. I'm talking to the whole room, but if I can really talk to each person individually, and that takes a lot of effort, especially for somebody like me. It's like I'm talking right now, but I have 10 thoughts. I'm 10 thoughts ahead, in my mind, and so I have to like learn to, hey, was I really present in this presentation? I always appreciate the good feedback. I always appreciate people coming up and saying, great speech, or I heard this, or I heard that, and I took this from that. But for me, I'm always still in the background, like, was I fully present? Because I know I can always be better, the more I work on that.
What's the greatest compliment that you can get from somebody that really hits home? Because there's the part I did something very early on in my career where I came off a stage and there was people, the audience was, I think the audience was right around like 2,500. So that's a lot of people.
That's a lot
And
of people.
there was a line, but my kids were waiting to go to Disneyland, right? Because it was a convention at Disneyland, and then we were going to Disneyland afterwards. But there was a long line afterwards, and my kids were like, "Dad, you can take like 10 more, but then we got to go see Mickey."
Yeah.
And I asked probably one of the dumbest questions that I learned. I asked, "What did you take from today?" And probably 95% of the people that answered told me things I didn't say. And one person at the end was like, "You just told me to keep doing what I'm doing."
Mm.
And I was like, in no place in today's keynote did I say that. And I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're doing. So you continuing to do what you're doing, I might have sent you the wrong message. Like that's where I was thinking in my head. And I've got a,
Yeah.
with sense of humor, you understand. But I'm going through that. And then my wife said to me, she said, "It's not what you, people won't see what you do. They won't hear what you say. They'll only hear where they are at."
Yeah.
And then she dropped that bomb and just moved on and wanted to be at Disneyland. And I was like, so
Yeah, that's good.
it was hard for me. But what are the things that you love when a person says, like at the end, that really will make a difference for you as Michael?
Yeah. That it I really pay attention to what people like you were mentioning, because people are taking something from your message that you weren't even planning on saying. Like exactly, that's exactly it. I have that, and I pay attention to that because I'm like, okay, so something in my message, you took this piece and you took it for yourself, and that's what you needed for that day. And so I started to realize, hey, where can I lean into that more? And
Mhm.
the more of that kind of feedback I get, I use that as a tool. It's like, okay, then I thought I was speaking to a business conference. I thought I was speaking to, and I realized they know what they need to do on a technical basis. So they don't, no one's bringing me in to make them better salesmen as far as like hitting higher numbers in the sense of, let me tell you how to be, because that's not what I'm, speaking on. That's not my expertise. But when you hear people like, man, I've been really like struggling, emotionally. I've been really reconsidering my career. I've been really struggling with my purpose. I'm really good at what I do, but I feel like I've been empty, and I've been lacking in that faith aspect of it, or I've been lacking in my connection with family, or whatever it is, connection to something bigger. And so I started to realize, yeah, people are taking things, where they're at, and I just lean into that more. And so the next time I'm speaking, I spend a little bit more time on something like that, and I can see where it's hitting, where it's resonating. So that's really cool. Um, yeah, a lot of times people will say like, "This is the best speech I've ever heard," which is, it's an amazing compliment, but interestingly, it's not the best, because I always want to know what about it, why, what did it move you? Did it make you laugh? Did it make you think? What was it? Because I also know, sometimes people, you just hear bad speakers or whatever it is, and so so that, yeah, that compliment's always amazing. But I know, I rate myself, I guess, on a different thing. Is how did I move you? Where was that connection? And oftentimes it'll be in a story that I share about my life, it's funny because it's like the times where you're the most vulnerable, that's where people connect the most. Some of the dumb stories that I'm like, I'll just share something simple, like my dad driving, calling my mom and hanging up after a minute, whatever it is. But those are the stories where people, because when I'm talking about my dad, people are thinking about their dad. They're thinking about their childhood. And I started to lean into that because I started to realize those are the things that are connecting, even though I wasn't planning on that being the thing that I connected on them with. So it was really cool.
So your mind, like I was saying earlier, your mind is always, and you even said it, you said, as you're answering the question, your mind is already moving. You've got 6 books now, the latest one, The Ones We Wait For. When you were finishing up the last couple of chapters of The Ones We Wait For, were you already thinking about the next one that you're doing?
Yeah, just because I already had another one in mind. And so yes, I was already, in my books, I'm writing, as a writer, you never want to write, you don't want to write what you think the audience is going to like. Because the minute you get caught doing that, you're going to miss the audience. When you write for, like, I love Ernest Hemingway, I believe, who said it. And I'm not no Ernest Hemingway, so I'm not comparing myself to, but he said something that really inspires me as a writer. He's like, writing is easy. All you have to do is sit down and bleed. And so it's like, it's because you're pouring out from yourself, and then that's what people are connecting with. And so for me, as I was finishing this book up, there's a lot of questions that I'm answering for myself, as I'm, going through the dialogue, going through the story. But I was like, man, I'd really like to write a book where it's just like, yeah, it's like purely me, like my worst thoughts, my dumbest thoughts, my biggest insecurities, those little petty things. I read a book by Dostoevsky. It was my first Dostoevsky book I've ever read. Somebody said that's the smallest book of his, so I'm like, I'll start with that. He's a Russian writer. I believe he's in the 1800s is when he. I could be totally wrong, but he wrote a book called Notes from Underground. And it's basically a psychology book. I mean, he's just talking about all those little someone bumps him on the shoulder walking in the street and doesn't apologize. And so he spends the next 2 years planning his revenge on this guy who clearly didn't even think enough of him to apologize to him. And so it's all these little petty human things that we have. Because I was reading that book and I found myself laughing out loud because I'm like, I thought that I was the only one that was this petty. I thought I was the only one that was this. And so I thought, like, thinking about that book, I'm like, I would love to write a book where it's just like purely just that pettiness, those little things those little thoughts that we hang on to. You hang out with a group of friends, the next morning you're thinking about, man, I shouldn't have said that. I probably look like an idiot. Like you start thinking back on your conversations and how you looked and how you sounded. I'll probably be obsessing about this podcast later, like, man, I shouldn't have said that. That probably made me look a certain way. And you start to overthink these things. So I thought it'd be really cool to write a book that kind of chewed on some of that stuff and brought some of that out. I think a lot of people would connect with that.
So how do you, as your list grows, right? We were talking about this earlier. You've got a mailing list. So when you've got a built-in audience, and your audience loves Michael. I mean, this was a thing. When I heard about the Mount of Olives and then the cabin at the end of the train, I heard about them from the same person. They already knew about your material, and then they were like, oh, wow, Michael's coming out with another one. I'm going to go ahead and read that. How do you keep yourself as a writer? You said it just a second ago as far as the concept, but how do you keep yourself not writing for the audience? Because that's a place where I mean, even we've been watching shows lately. If you haven't watched, have you and your wife watched Lioness?
No. We've been watching Silo.
Okay. So have you watched Landman?
No, I haven't. I got a lot to catch up on.
These are all, no, you don't. Just keep your life. They're all Taylor Sheridan, and Sheridan, he's really good. There are points in all of the, Yellowstone and 1883 and, where we watch them all. There's a point where it becomes more about the character development and almost the kind of soap opera than it is about the action that you're loving that's happening, right? It's his style, whatever it is. But what I notice is a lot of times when you're watching a show or even you're reading a book, multiple from an author, sometimes you almost see as a consumer or the audience, you can see when they start playing to me as opposed to the reason why I started reading them in the first place. How do you, what bumpers do you put in place, or are you conscious of it, to make sure that you don't start writing songs as a musician for what is happening right now? You continue to write what you think is the best.
Yeah, it's almost going back to even what we were talking about with the whole speaking thing. It's hearing what people are resonating with and leaning into it, but at the same time, um, not that's something I'm very conscious about, is not writing um just to what I think the audience will like. And that's really tough, because it's like you get a lot of feedback, you read the reviews, and it's just like, but I get bored with my own, like I want to do something else. Like this book that I was talking about, the next one that I'm, haven't started on yet, but it's kind of what I've been thinking about. I want to push myself as a writer. I want to push myself. This book, the ones we wait for, most of my books are faith. They have a touch of faith in it, but they're personal development books. I would say their story, they're more about, pursuing dreams, that kind of a thing. Um, I never planned on writing a faith-based book. I never wanted to. I always kind of figured, I want to hit a broader audience. I don't want to just write to just, Christian people, that kind of a thing. But getting those emails and getting that feedback, I was like, these people are lacking in a hope. They're feeling like they're living in regret. And I want to remind them that even if you don't feel like you've achieved everything you wanted to achieve, like your life wasn't a waste, number one. Number two, there's something so much greater in store. And so you could look at it in one way and say, yeah, you're writing to try to so your audience, to a very specific audience, but at the same time, it's not a book that I've ever thought that I would write. And so for me to put it together, it took something different out of me. It challenged me in a different way. And so that's what I want to continue to do. So it's like, I'm glad people liked, I just already assumed, I'm like, so a lot of people that like my first couple of books probably won't like this one, because maybe it's too Christian, or maybe somebody Christian will be reading this book and be like, oh, it's not as good as or there's some flaws and some holes in your thing. I'm like, there's always going to be criticism, but that's why I always remind myself of that. And I'm just like, I'm going to write, this is the season I'm in, this is what I'm struggling with, or this is what I want to, talk about. So that's what I'm going to write. And so I've already just come to I've already just kind of told myself, it's like, some will hate it, some will like it. This is what's in my heart right now. This one I'm gonna put out. And that way, that keeps me from just trying to put the same repetitive book or the same style and the same thing that the audience, just because I think that that's what the audience might like. So it was a struggle. It's hard to do that, because you're taking a risk. You don't want to piss off half the people that, are like, oh, okay, I really like this guy's stuff, but all of a sudden he's trying to push God on me or whatever it is. That thought goes on in my head, But I'm like, hey, I feel like this needs to be said, and this is what's on my heart. So.
Well, I think that's incredible. Have you compared it to almost a musician? Like I heard someone speak the other day, and they were talking about, phases in life or seasons in life, thinking about them almost as albums. If you were a band or a musician, right? And but think about the band. I mean, there's all different types. There's the guy who has the one-hit wonder, right? There's that guy. Then there's the longevity. Like my daughter, who's 16 years old, McKenna, I love you, baby. She listens to the Beatles. And we were talking about it, and she was like, Dad, I really don't know exactly what I want to do. And I said, well, because I heard this guy speak, so I tried to make it my own wisdom. I didn't tell her that I had just listened to somebody. I was like, look, Dad is the wise sage here. But the guy had talked about that different albums, whether it be the scariest thing is a sophomore album, as you probably know. You have the book that hits, and then you come with the second one. You're like, I hope.
All the pressure.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But with the Beatles, what was so incredible is they had so many different styles. If you looked over the course of their career and their lifetime and their body of work, their lifetime of work, there were some people that liked Abbey Road that didn't like Sgt. Pepper's, that didn't. I mean, they resonated, and there was different eras, and it was literally different music,
different audiences.
Completely different audiences.
Yeah.
Do you? I mean, like, do you see yourself in that type of realm as far as the risk taking part of it? And like, what are the conversations with you and Kinsey when you're going to take a risk? And you're going completely against, maybe it's the sound, like Switchfoot, one of my favorite bands of all time. They did it. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, I am.
So
I'm not, yeah, I know their songs.
they had an album that
Don't
came
quiz
out.
me on it.
Well, I won't quiz you, I promise. But they had a album come out that's called Native Tongue that sounded nothing like their other stuff. But honestly, it was a risk. And for me, it was one of the best albums that they had ever done. Right? What are the conversations that you and Kinsey have as you're going through and as you're testing things out that we don't get to hear about as the public? We just look and say, oh, wow, he did another book. It's amazing. We love it. We all want it. Everyone wants him to speak for us. But what do you guys deal with personally?
Yeah, that's usually, I mean, usually she's just agreeing with me because that's kind of woman she is. She just has full trust in anything I do. I mean, she'll challenge me, so it's not like she's not aware of, she's very good at pushing me back to, well, remember you were saying you didn't want to, or you wanted to kind of try something new. So don't do this just because your other book was doing good. So she'll push me on that. She'll challenge me, which is awesome to have. It's awesome to have. But yeah, she hears all of my doubts, all my insecurities. And, for her, it's like, she's just down. She's like, hey, I know, like, pour out, it'll be good. Like, just because I know how you obsess about it. I know how much effort you're going to put into it. It's going to be good. So who cares what the other one was about, or who cares if it's going to hit a different audience? Like, continue to do your thing, because this is what you're good at. And this is your purpose. This is your talent, and it's going to be good. Doesn't have to match that, or it doesn't have to hit the same audience that the other one did. And that's always cool to have, because I'm always like, even though I know I'm going to do it anyway, I'm always kind of testing out on her. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And yeah, it's awesome to have her in that. But yeah, every book's going to come with doubt. Every, like I said, I just always have to remind myself, hey, there's going to be people that are not going to like it. There's going to be people that are, but I'm not writing it. I'm writing it for my readers, but at the same time, I'm writing it as I'm expressing myself. I'm putting my own thoughts out there. And this is not anything. This new book has nothing to do with the other ones. This is a new season of my life, or a new thought, completely new idea. The people that like my other books don't have to like this one. It's going to find its own audience, because the message, if these are things I'm struggling with, there's a lot more people that are struggling with the same thing. It will find its audience. And so once I come to peace with that, it really makes it a lot easier.
What are some of the risks right now that you're contemplating and that you're struggling with right now?
Probably that new book. That one, yeah, I'm already thinking of, it's like, how much of myself do I want to put out? If you put guardrails on yourself, then you risk connecting with someone. But if if I can really put this book out in a way to where I'm, I can go down that path of like these little petty thoughts and these little things, and it kind of helps me with my own psychology. That's going to help other people. And so, yeah, that's probably one of those big ones.
Do you take into account at times, I've run into this at times, where there's situational things in my life that, obviously with the podcast, or even the speaking part, I'm a little bit more protected because things are recorded today, but not every single thing. The podcast is a little bit different. So when I want to tell a story about my daughter and, about my son, whatever it is, sometimes I'm in fear, like, oh man, what if the parent of the little kid who was a jerk to my son that I told the story about ends up listening to the podcast? Does that go through your mind at all as a writer?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Probably more so as a speaker, because I share a lot more personal stories and specific stories. So I try to, but at the same time, it's like, the way I look at it, it's, you don't want to start throwing people under the bus. So you got to be careful with that for sure. But you can change it up. And it's like, ultimately this is my journey. This is my story. This is what made me who I am. And so, I'll share stories from, this happening to me, a girl, breaking up with me at 16, or telling me, because I've had a very specific thing, something like that happened to me, where I had a video that went viral, and the story that I share in there is about a very specific person without mentioning names, but I was like, whatever, like, this is part of my journey. Maybe she didn't even know she affected me in that way, but now she does. But ultimately it's like, hey, it helps me reach more people. It helps me, it's if it made me who I am today, like, it can help somebody else. And so, yeah, you do have to be careful about throwing people specifically under a bus, because now you're starting beef with people, that could potentially hinder your progress, when it's not necessarily, or it's not about that. And so, yeah, without mentioning names, things like that, I still try to be honest and vulnerable, and like I said, without mentioning specific names. But yeah, I wouldn't hesitate sharing a story of the parents of some kid, that was being a jerk to your boy. I think maybe they can find it useful to hear something like that. So
I think we can all learn from you, though, Michael. We could turn it into a parable, right? We could
yeah,
change
yeah,
the
exactly. There
names,
you go.
change the faces. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Which I think would be great. What
yeah.
in all this, the media that you have, the companies that you're speaking with, things like that. What is a question that you wish more people would ask you?
Um, in regards to personal development, or the journey, or um, that's a good question. You're saying, so, like, if the audience, what a question that the audience could ask me.
Anybody?
Anybody? Okay. Um, that's a good question. I'm gonna think about that for a little bit. Uh, I gotta be honest with you. I don't. You stumped me on that one. Put me on the hot spot. Would you say about, if we can be a little bit more specific? Would you say about writing, about my speaking, about the journey, just to give me an idea? Because, yeah, that's a pretty good question. I don't know if I've.
I mean, I think that wherever you would want to take it, because I think I think as a public figure, like you are, and,
Mm,
to have the notoriety that you do, sometimes there's things that you want to share that you don't get a chance to be able to share because no one asked you the question. Yeah. You
mm,
know what I mean?
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And, you're a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of wisdom.
Mm.
Um,
Y- as you're saying that, I think probably about my faith. Speaking to organizations, speaking to schools, speaking to business conferences, things like that. You you kind of have to be careful. A lot of them are like, don't talk about God, don't talk about politics, don't talk about this. Not that I usually never get a list, but it's kind of like an unspoken thing. Like, because you do want to protect their name, because they are hiring you. You don't want to push your own thing on people, though I'm never afraid of sharing my that I'm a Christian, about my faith, but I don't like make that the main thing. But I do wish I had a little bit more opportunities, which actually tonight I got invited to speak at a youth group at a local church here, a pastor friend of mine. So that's gonna be exciting. I wish I had a little bit more opportunities to share about my faith, because
mm.
you could talk about persistence, you could talk about taking action, you could talk about breaking past fears, and I wish people were a little bit more persistent on asking me, well, how do you do that? Because for me, that's my faith. I talk about, by taking little steps, that kind of thing, but ultimately, like, without God, I'm nothing. Like, I would be in shambles. That's what my faith to me is. My faith to me is, God is my psychiatrist, my psychologist, my mentor, my in everything.
Mhm.
And so I wish I had them a little bit more opportunity to share that, because on your own it's tough. But when you wake up in the morning and you have the dream, you have the vision, but you have that faith, and that ultimately it's part of a bigger plan, and ultimately he's the one providing these opportunities for me. And if I lose an opportunity, like, let's say they hired another speaker instead of me, it was between me and a couple other guys, they hired someone else. I used to be like, man, in the call, what did I say wrong? What was the reason why they chose the other person over me? And now it's just like, I'm like, hey, if that's not where I was supposed to be, then I'm going to take that as a sign from God. Like, that wasn't the audience I was supposed to be in front of. Good.
Yes.
Where, and now it's like, when I get the yes, I'm like, there's a reason that I'm supposed to be speaking to these people. And it gives me the freedom then to be myself and not to overthink like I used to because I know there's a reason that I'm here in front of this audience. So I'm going to be myself and I'm going to open my heart up. And I know that there's a reason that this audience is, or I'm in front of this audience, and that gives me so much freedom. But that wouldn't come without that faith. And so, yeah, I wish I could spend a little bit more time sharing with people the real foundation that I stand on. It's not myself. It's not my own confidence that came out of, thin air. It's that my faith.
How do you take that, right? So when you have the faith aspect of it, and you talked about the phone call that, there's a couple of speakers, there's 3-4 speakers. You didn't get chosen. You have the faith and the hope and the peace to know that, hey, this just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
How do you stand in that place between having audacious goals, right? Locking into them, and then the faith side of it? How do those two coincide?
I think it's like a constant, like when an airplane's flying, there's like a tracker on it, right? It sends out like a beacon, and you can, if you're looking, somebody's watching it, you can see like, okay, we got a response here. There's a beacon flash here, 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 so we can track where the plane is flying, even though we're so far away from it. And I feel like that's what the path is like. It's like you have the goal, you have the vision. We always have to send out a beacon, like, hey, like, am I still on the right track? Is this still really about the bigger vision? Is this now becoming a little bit more about the ego? And so it's like the faith is like that little beacon. It's like the constantly checking back in. Hey, are we still, is this still in your will? Am I still in your will? Am I still doing, is this still like, am I still on the right track? Am I still living according to my talents and my abilities? Am I taking it easy somewhere? Am I letting fear creep back in? And am I now hindering myself from all that you have for me? Where am I stopping where am I sabotaging myself? So it's like that constant checking in, and that's what helps a lot for me.
When's the last time that you were moving towards that, like you were talking about the airplane moving towards the goal, and then there was a shift that happened that you maybe sometimes don't see it, that it then became about you and became about your agenda as opposed to his? Has there been a time like that?
I would say with this new book, actually, yeah, because I really didn't want to write it. It's a book about heaven. I'm like, half the people that read my books probably aren't, Christian or faith based. And so my first thought was like, no, that I told myself I wasn't going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I got to keep it more towards what my original theme was. And then I really started getting a conviction of like, hey, like, this is what I want you to say. If you're not going to say it, that's fine, because I don't think God's going to force our hand. But then I'm like, man, the last thing I want is to stop hearing that inspiration and to stop getting those downloads. And so I'm like, if I say no now, like, is that going to dry out? Is the well going to dry out? That and so it's like that. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go with it. I feel like this is something I have to say. It's something I want to write about. Topic of heaven. Yeah, some people might not, resonate with it, but and the biggest thing in that was like, okay, now we're talking about heaven. And I'm like, well, I could kind of write it in a more broad way, because a lot of people believe in an afterlife, but I'm like, I had, again, the other conviction, what do you believe is the way that you make it in? And I'm like, crap, because now I have to, write it. Here's what I believe. It's the cross. It's the only way. It's not my works. It's not, I can't be too bad of a person, and I can't get in there because of my own works. And so now I'm writing about the power of the cross and the reason for the cross, even when I was like, man, I really did not want to like write about this, because I'm not no preacher, and my audience is usually readers that are reading about personal development. And now I'm over here, feel like I'm like a Bible thumper or something, but I'm like, but if I'm going to write about heaven, and I really believe that this is my conviction, then I have to include that. And I have to include the story and the reason for the cross, and the reason. It's a simple, thing that you take. It's a gift that was given to us, and it's a gift that's freely received, and all you have to do is accept it. And again, not something I thought I'd ever write about, but I'm like, I can't, like, if I'm going to write about this topic, I have to write about, how we get there. And so, yeah, that was tough. That was definitely one of those risk moments. That was definitely one of those checking back with the beacon, and, having to get corrected on that.
So, Michael, you know the reason why I started the podcast, because my 2 kids, we've expanded. The reason why I was saying it too is January 6th last year, I started a little thing called Inchstones. And Inchstones, it started off as wisdom and the vibe, and then it kind of morphed into Inchstones, but it was just going through the corresponding proverb, corresponding day. And what I noticed was, even in myself, that risk, and I took the risk of, I mean, literally, when I started it off, if you go back to January 6th last year, I was literally just had the Bible in front of me and I was reading Proverbs, not from a religious standpoint, but just from a principle standpoint.
Yeah.
And over the course of the year, we actually did, well, there was interviews inside that, but this year we did over 275 episodes.
Oh, wow.
So,
that's incredible.
But in this, I want you to know how much life you're speaking to me in it, because through that process, there was a lot of it, like, you know, who do you think you are? You're not a preacher. Why are you doing this? You've taught on business, you've taught on these things, but now you're saying, now don't try and, you know, beat someone with the Bible, whatever it was. But God just kept saying, you're not speaking to the audience, you're being obedient to me, and that's what I want. And so, you know, and it's become a labor of love. I mean, it's a lot of fun to be able to do it, and, you know, but I just want you to know how much the impact. So when I first started the show, I wanted to get iconic people like yourself, because I didn't want my kids to worship idols. I wanted them to see what was possible, and your little one is going to now understand what's possible, because you're going to have, you know, so many different aspects of what her pops is doing. What advice would you have now, being a new father, to Maddox and McKenna? Maddox being 13 years old, McKenna being 16 and now driving. What advice would you have from them? And if you could use their names and call yourself Uncle Michael, it would be awesome.
Yeah. Maddox and McKenna, Uncle Michael here. First of all, to McKenna, don't be on your phone when you're driving. Listen to your dad. He's smart. It really is going to help you. What I would say to you guys is connect to the ultimate source, and your dad understands this better than anyone. And look at his life. Look how God has led him in his life. Look how much of who he is, the foundation that he stands on, and how powerful that is. And my challenge for you two would be not to just take it from what he's saying, but develop it for yourself. Connect to that source yourself, so that it's something that you can stand on, and learn from him. But make it into your own. And that comes from reading, that comes from praying, that comes from listening. And that's going to be the only foundation that you're going to stand on, because life is going to shake you up. Your confidence is going to be shaken. There's going to be obstacles along the way, but the only thing that's not going to be shaken is that connection with the greatest source that there is. And so connect to that, and I think it's going to do you a lot of good in your life.
Michael, you're way better than advertised, and you're advertised very well. You know what I mean? So what I want to do to every one of you, if you guys are out there, if you're listening on Apple, thank you. You're watching on Spotify, watching on YouTube, or wherever you're consuming the podcast, I want to thank you. I want to tell every one of you, go right now and get the ones we wait for. Go get that. But also what it's going to do is it's going to open up a whole different realm, because there's 5 other books that you're going to want to consume from Michael. Michael Ivanov, if he hasn't spoken in your company right now, literally your conference isn't as good as it can be. So make sure that you connect with that. We've got the links in the bio too for you, Michael. My hat's off to you, man. You're a huge inspiration. You make me look cool in front of my friends too, because one of my friends, you're one of his favorite authors, and the fact that I get a chance to be able to spend time with you, call you my friend, is amazing. What I would invite you to do too, if you're going to buy one of the books, go to his website at it's Speak Life 365 and get an author signed copy. To an author, that means the world to us that you do that specifically, and which I think would be amazing.
Awesome.
Michael, you're awesome, man. Will you stick around for a second? We'll run a little commercial, but will you stick around for a second? Because I got a couple questions for you. Sound good?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Any final words for the wonderful people?
Keep fighting. Keep believing. The best is yet to come.
Michael, you're incredible, man, and you're officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.
certain we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting right before your eyes. So it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised.